Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're heading to the arid landscapes of Rajasthan, India back in 2003. We're looking at a real-life murder mystery that is absolutely chilling. It forces us to look at the darkest corners of human nature and how one microscopic detail can unravel a perfect crime. It's a story about a tiny piece of evidence that literally refused to burn. Let's get right into it. Just imagine the absolute chaos facing the local police. They're staring at a completely horrific puzzle. You've got a burnt head in one spot, a disemboweled body in another, and absolutely zero identification. There's no wallet, no ID card, not even a missing persons report in the area. So how on earth do you solve the murder of a literal ghost? How do you catch a killer when you don't even know who the victim is? Which brings us to part one, the gruesome discovery on April 28, 2003. The timeline here is wild. At exactly 5:01 p.m., an anonymous, totally panicked caller rings the Sohar police station. They blurt out that there's a severed head on the dried bed of the Banas River. And then they just hang up. When Station House officer Surendra Singh and his team get to Pillar 11 of the riverbed, it's a grim scene. There's a severed head, but the killer had heavily burnt it, obviously trying to destroy the victim's face. But where's the rest of him? Well, a radio call comes in, redirecting them to a well owned by a local named Bajrang Nai. Inside, floating in the water, is this bundle tied up with bed sheets. They pull it out with iron hooks, and what they find is sickening. A naked, headless, disemboweled body, mutilated and burnt. A couple of kilometers away, they also find a blood-soaked full-sleeve shirt and some plastic covers. The police had the physical pieces, sure, but the body was so unrecognizable, and with no missing persons reports, they actually ended up performing its last rites right there, just storing the physical evidence they had left. And that brings us to Section 2, the steel wire clue, and how investigators narrowed the funnel. Now here is where this turns from a totally cold case into an absolute masterclass in forensic tracking. 4 days after finding the body, police release the details to the press, and they drop one incredibly crucial detail. Because despite the killer's best efforts to roast the victim's face and destroy his identity, one tiny thing survived the fire. A surgical steel wire fixed right beneath the left eye. This meant the victim had undergone some sort of major facial surgery in the past. This one unburned anomaly, it became the literal beacon of hope for the entire investigation. So let's track exactly how this tiny wire cracked the case. On May 4th, a man named Durga Prasad is just sitting there reading the morning paper. He sees the story about the charred head and the specific steel wire under the left eye. His heart absolutely drops. Why? Because his son, a wealthy marble businessman from Kishingar named Bhavani Shankar Sharma, had been missing. And worse, Durga Prasad remembers taking his son to a hospital in Delhi 11 years ago after a bad accident. A surgeon there, Dr. Shiv Shankar Saha, had used a surgical steel wire to fuse Bhavani's broken cheekbone back together. Now, the police couldn't just go off a father's hunch. They needed hard medical proof. So they immediately contact Dr. Saha in Delhi to dive into his surgical records to verify this unique procedure. Dr. Saha checks his files and confirms the surgery. But get this, he drops a number that completely blows the case wide open. 3. Dr. Saha tells the investigators he was actually the only specialist in all of India doing this specific steel wire procedure at the time, and he had only ever performed it on 3 patients from the entire state of Rajasthan. 3. The police just got the ultimate narrow funnel. They systematically tracked down these 3 patients, 2 of them alive and well. The third was Bhavani Shankar Sharma, missing since April 25th. Through this incredibly precise medical verification, that single surviving piece of metal definitively linked those charred remains to the missing businessman. Our ghost finally had a name. Moving to Section 3, the brutal confession. We know who it is, but now we need to know why. Figuring out the victim's identity is just half the battle, right? Investigators immediately turn their attention to Bhavani's family. While his parents were frantic, his wife, Nidhi Sharma, was bizarrely calm. Like she hadn't filed a missing persons report, and she even told her in-laws to just stay away. It wasn't until police brought her brother in and interrogated him right in front of her that her icy exterior finally shattered, and she confessed. Nidhi had orchestrated the whole thing. Her motive? Extreme, totally unfounded paranoia that her husband was cheating, combined with this deep, obsessive fear that he was going to leave his massive business and property to his parents. To pull it off, she bribed Bhavani's own driver and friend, Ashok Vaishnav, promising to waive his car loan and handing him a stack of extra cash. The timeline on the night of April 26th is just It's pure, premeditated evil. Around 7:30 p.m., Nidhi spikes her husband's juice with sleeping pills. By 10 p.m., he's passed out on a table. That's when Ashok shows up with an axe, striking his own friend 10 to 15 times. But somehow, Pavani doesn't die immediately. An hour later, around 11 p.m., he actually starts waking up. Ashok swings again, striking his neck and breaking the bone. But the head was still attached. And that is when Nidhi, his own wife, grabs a knife and methodically severs his head from his body. By 2 a.m., they're driving around the pitch-black region, dumping the body parts in the well and the dried riverbed. And the cover-up was honestly just as horrific as the murder. When Nidhi severed the head, there was obviously a massive amount of blood. She actually took a plastic drinking jerry can and drained 3 to 4 liters of her husband's thick blood into it. They later buried that can in the dirt in a nearby town. Originally, they tried to just burn the entire body right there in the basement of the house. When that didn't work out, Nidhi literally took her husband's severed head, placed it directly on a burner on her kitchen stove, and roasted it to destroy his face. The level of psychological detachment here is just staggering. Section 4. A Voice from the Grave. The Diary. While police were searching the house, they stumbled upon something that essentially allowed the victim to testify at his own murder trial. Bhavani was a guy who kept a daily diary, and what they found inside those pages was absolutely heartbreaking. On page 154, written nearly a year before his murder, he wrote this exact line: "I fear I am being poisoned in my food. I don't know what she mixes in it. Nowadays, my tongue has started faltering." He knew. He absolutely knew his life was in danger, and he knew exactly who was doing it. This diary was basically a timeline of severe mental torture. On page 134, he talks about Nidhi aggressively demanding a divorce, even telling a maid to lock their 2 little kids in a room while she took off for hours. On page 139, he notes her threatening to file fake legal cases just to destroy his reputation and shut down his company. And maybe the saddest detail of all, investigators found that the final pages of his diary were completely covered in dried watermarks, tear stains. Pavani went through all of this, staying in that house purely out of love for his kids and his parents. Ultimately, his own words became the final nail in the coffin against his wife. Which brings us to our final section, the 2024 aftermath. Was justice served? Let's look at where things stand today. Both Nidhi and Ashok were convicted and sentenced to life in prison. And that was largely thanks to that tiny, inescapable surgical steel wire that survived the kitchen stove, and of course, Bhavani's diary. The kids were raised by his parents, and the marble business kept running. But here's the shocker. As of 2024, after serving 21 years of her life sentence, Nidhi Sharma was officially released. She is now a free citizen. And that leaves us with a deeply unsettling reality. Nidhi murdered her husband because she was paranoid about losing his property. She served her time. And today, right now, she is locked in a fierce legal battle with her own children over the custody of that exact same property, the very property of the husband she butchered. It forces us to ask a really heavy question. The legal system has run its course, sure, but does a concluded sentence truly equate to justice? It's a haunting end to a case that started with a ghost on a riverbed, solved by a single thread of steel. Thanks for tuning into this explainer. I'll catch you in the next one.